Whether you want to make your front yard more beautiful, grow your own produce, and save money by being environmentally conscientious. All this, plus much more, coming up on Irvine Scene's Spring Gardening Edition. Welcome to Irvine Scene's Spring Gardening Edition. Today, we'll meet some of Irvine's top gardening experts. Eric, tell me, what does a landscape architect do?
We design the garden starting from scratch, working closely with the building architect, developing a compatibility between the building and the landscape. So it looks like it's a kind of a seamless design. It really works well together. Technically, we deal with the civil engineer who is responsible for grading and drainage. We'll set the parameters for that. We do the hardscape, the selection of materials, the lighting, the planting. The easiest way that I explain it to a client is everything outside of the four walls of the building is pretty much what the landscape architect does.
You're also a master gardener.
Yes.
Tell me what that is and what you have to do to have that title.
Okay, that is a wonderful 6-month program. We go through classes. It's through the University of California Extension Service. It's taught by a wonderful cross-section of experts dealing with just about everything you can imagine in planting, composting, insect problems, plant propagation, you name it.
You've helped many people design their spaces. When somebody comes to you, what are the factors you take into consideration when designing space? And what would you tell other people who want to design their space?
First of all, how are they going to live in the garden? Do they have young children, so they need some space for the kids to play? Or are they older people and they want to entertain a lot? Is there interest, say, in environmental, where they really do not want to have lawn? They'd like to have a drought-tolerant garden. You can have just a barbecue, or you can have a whole entertainment center outside. Right. And that depends really on the way the people live, because you can go from a very, very simple center to a very expensive one. So you try to find also the budget. When you start, you try to determine about where they want to go with this project, because most people are putting it in relationship to the value of the house, and there are many, many ways to come up with beautiful designs using very reasonable materials.
There's pretty much two ways you can use the space. What are they?
One is really in two words, active or passive. Okay. Passive would be one that you just like to sit and look at. And there are a lot of clients that I say, are you a gardener? And they say, absolutely not. We're going to bring in a gardener. We're too busy, but we want the garden to look nice. That's what I would call a passive garden. And it can be beautiful. It could be absolutely wonderful. Mm-hmm. Then there's the active garden, and that can be everything. It can be the pool, it can be the spa, it can be have raised vegetable gardens, and they actively go out. We've done several in these communities that will support the kitchen, producing a lot of produce. And then there are rose gardens, which require a lot of work. So that is the two answers that I would give to that kind of question. Yeah.
If you're thinking about how you'd like to use your space, take a look at Eric's examples of passive and active gardens.
This garden is based on the Andalusian Spanish garden design built around a court. It allows the house to open out into this wonderful enclosed court that the owners can entertain in, they can work in, they can just enjoy our beautiful California climate in this very secure and beautiful environment.
And this courtyard can be seen, I noticed, from many of the rooms.
All of the rooms open out. We have French doors, paving, so it is a very indoor-outdoor space.
Now, you mentioned the sound of water, which is obviously a very prevalent part of this atmosphere. Tell me about how you arrived how did you arrive at that?
Well, this style with the fountain and the narrow slot is very much a Moorish style that grew out of the gardens of Spain. However, in California, the sound of water is something that we can duplicate in many, many different ways. It can simply be a pot like we have in the foreground with water running out of it. It could be nothing more than a simple bowl with water running out. So for a small garden, you can get very much the same kind of thing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the plants that are here. You said they're low maintenance plants. What are they and how low maintenance are they?
The palms that are surrounding the court are date palms. They come out of the desert. They are a pretty much self-maintaining plant. The hedges are Myrtus communis. They require some pruning. And then the citrus are irrigated and drained in each one of the pots, so the maintenance is very, very minimal. With a little bit of spraying and fertilizing, you get this wonderful, healthy citrus tree out here in the garden. And then in front of us is what they call crown of thorns. It's a succulent. It's very, very self-maintaining. You hardly have to do a thing to it, and it just produces these wonderful red flowers. And again, it's the kind of thing you would have found in a very dry Mediterranean climate.
So not everybody has this much space, and some people have more space, right? But this is a good example of different ways to use both active and passive space. Tell me a little bit about what we see here.
Well, this is a swimming pool, and fortunately swimming pools can be all different sizes and shapes. This one fit the garden very nicely, and in conjunction with the grass, gave the family a lot of flexibility. The grandchildren could be using the grass. They can use the spa, they can use the pool, and family also wanted to have citrus in the garden, and so at the end of the garden, we used the lemon trees to be kind of the terminus. As you can see, it's a very, very prolific grove of little lemons.
So this is an example of active.
Yes, yeah. But really not that active. The grass works well when the kids are here. They can roll on it. Other than that, it's a quiet garden. So it works well in all different ways.
So this is an example of an active garden. Tell me a little bit about this space, Art.
Okay, as you can see, this is a garden that requires a lot of work to keep it as beautiful as it is. And this is why we say it's an active garden, because it does require a great deal of activity in the garden to make it as attractive as it is. You have paths coming through, so you have maintenance on both sides to keep the plants in nice shape. There's removal of dead plants, flowers, amending the soil, many activities, besides the skill of the gardener to select the proper color and plant height. You can see through the garden that everything has been thought out. Even though it looks like it's perhaps random, believe me, somebody doing this really knows what they're doing. So this is a great deal of skill and art that goes into making a garden like this.
And this would be a high maintenance garden.
Yes. Yeah.
Eric, now we're standing in a raised vegetable bed garden. What if somebody wanted to have something like this in their backyard? What would they do?
This is a very easy thing to construct. You start at your existing grade, build up with wood, and there are a number of choices that you can use. I prefer 18 inches, but you can choose any height that you want. The advantages are that you can add excellent soil to the raised bed, so even if you have very heavy clays or bad soil, this will give you an excellent medium in which to start your vegetables.
So traditionally, Eric, most people choose to put a lawn in their front yard that looks something like this. Or you could choose to use far less lawn in your landscaping, like this. Or you could choose to have no lawn in your front yard so that it looks like this. Tell me a little bit about your use of lawn.
Well, I think a lot of people are trying to get away from lawn. For so many years, everybody had front lawns. New communities are being designed without lawn at all in the front yard. And we would like to suggest that if there's a lawn, use it in the backyard. It's a place that children can play. They're safer in that area. It probably reduces the amount of lawn in the garden by 50% or more, depending on how you use it. And there are wonderful lawns that require much less water, much less fertilizer. There are great alternatives to the lawns that have been used for so many years.
So you've decided how you want to use your space, how you're going to lay it out, and what kind of role you want to play in maintaining that space. Now it's time to choose the plants. Eric, what kind of considerations go into choosing the plants for your landscape?
There are several ways to begin, but the very simplest way to think about it is starting with lawn, ground cover, shrubs, and trees. And within shrubs, you have various heights of shrubs. And the reason for thinking about it this way is thinking about what you see from where you are. Obviously, the lower the plant, the more visibility you get from the next level of plant up and the plant beyond that. Then if you take it one more step, you decide the color of the plants, the foliage of the plants, when the plants bloom, and if you put all of this together successfully, you have a nice looking garden.
Excellent. Now, as we're standing here now, can we see an example of some of those choices?
Absolutely. We have out in the parkway, we have Sunspot, which is more of a ground cover. You can see how low that is. We have the little daisy over there, which is a low. So I would put those in kind of the ground cover level. We have lantana here in our foreground. We have lavender, which is a little bit higher. And you can see by the way these all step up, you're not hiding one from the other. And then behind us, if we turn around, we have larger shrubs, and then we have our trees. And this is all part of the development of the garden and how you want to use it.
So now we've got our aesthetic considerations. We know it's going to look good in what spots. We also have some other considerations. How can we ensure that our plants are going to thrive?
Okay, that gets you into really knowing something about your garden. Your building has four sides: north, south, east, and west. Your trees create shade. Where the sun comes up creates a type of shade, and then it goes to warmer in the west. So you have to analyze all of that. Plus, you've got soil conditions. You have clay, you have sandy soil, and you have water conditions. So if you put all of these together, those are kind of the basic foundations that you build your garden around.
Okay, what about trees? Tell me about trees.
Within the trees area, it's a lot of fun because you can have deciduous trees, those kinds of trees that drop their leaves, or you can have evergreen. And you could have a birch, which drops its leaves. You can have a magnolia, which keeps its leaves, and magnolias come in different heights. They have a flower that is fragrant. Arbutus, a strawberry tree. You can have a pepper tree. You can have a sycamore tree. So you can have a jacaranda tree. And some of those have flowers, some of them don't. Some drop their leaves, some don't. So there's a lot of variety that you can work with.
And are there specific considerations that homeowners or landscapers might want to factor in?
Yes, it's about size. Some of the ones that I mentioned, the birch as an example are a tall, kind of narrow tree. The jacaranda is a broad spreading tree. The strawberry tree is more of an upright tree. The pepper is a very large tree, so you want to always consider when you choose a tree to give it adequate space in the garden so you're not having to get in there and just prune the tree all the time. So think of the size, and you can go to various sources and get the height and the width of these trees, and then you can select the proper spot in the garden for those trees.
So for us novices, how do we determine what kind of soil we have and what kind of soil is going to do well with that plant?
It's important to actually, if you're a real novice and don't really understand the soil properties in your garden, it would be good to consult an expert, because as an example, a clay soil is a type of material that you can make a ball out of and literally make a clay pot. Sandy soil is sand, and between that you have sandy loam and other things. So it's important because all of that is the property of drainage, and if the plant doesn't get proper drainage, you can get disease. And without getting terribly technical, you really do have to understand all of this. So some nurseries are very good. Various horticultural people, plant people, landscape architects, people of this with this background can help the new plant owner or the garden owner in helping out in how to approach the problem. Well, we can't talk about gardening without talking about water and water conservation.
which is why we came down to the South Coast Research and Extension Center to meet with their director, Darren Haver, and talk about water conservation here at their demonstration landscapes. What do we need to know about water conservation?
Water conservation is very important in Southern California because we live in an arid environment. An arid environment, we don't get rain in the summertime, so we need to irrigate to keep our turf and plants looking good. Some of the things they can do is maybe change the plants that they're using in their landscapes. They may improve their irrigation technique so that they're actually applying water to the plants rather than the hardscape or the concrete. And also they might think about looking into some of the new technologies out there.
Excellent. Now, can we take a look at some of those things here today?
Absolutely. There's two types of hardscape here. What we're standing on are what are called interlocking pavers or pervious pavers. Okay. And they're basically set in sand and a base. And they all come in different sizes and shapes, and they have different openings in between the bricks. Okay. If you have bigger openings, obviously you're going to get more water that will infiltrate down through the soil. Okay. And the concept is keeping water on site. So if it rains, we have water that infiltrates in. If we have irrigation overspray, it sinks in as well. We also have here flagstone, which is very typical of a lot of homeowners, but most homeowners sink it in concrete. So it's impervious. So we have it in a decomposed granite substance that when it's wetted up, it actually becomes pretty solid and holds the flagstone in place, but it also allows water to infiltrate through.
Darren, tell me about this barrel.
This is an example of a rain barrel that is becoming more and more popular. One of the things that we found is that it not only helps with water conservation, but water quality. Research by UC Davis has shown that most of the runoff during a rain event comes off the roof and then onto a sidewalk and onto the driveway and then on out to the street. So this is a way of intercepting that water as much as you possibly can. You can actually collect enough water that you can then use the water to irrigate potted plants or even the landscape itself.
Darren, you mentioned earlier one of the biggest problems is that most of the water runs down the cement driveway or the sidewalk into the street. What can you do about that?
Okay, one of the things that we've installed here is what we call our slot drains. Okay. And so as the runoff goes down the driveway, we catch that in what we built a slot. Hey. And in that slot is actually a 4-inch drain pipe that is actually laid across as the driveway is installed. Okay. And then when the driveway is completely done, you come back again with a concrete saw and you actually just cut a slot in the concrete as well as into the top of that 4-inch pipe. And as the water runs down, the water falls in and then pitches to that side and can infiltrate back into the soil.
I think the most common questions people ask about watering are, is there a best time of day to water, and how do I know how much to water?
We suggest that people water early in the morning. Okay. And the reason for that is as it warms up, you're going to get more evaporation from your sprinklers, and you're also going to get usually the pickup of wind, which actually blows the water off of your plant material and onto your hardscape. Okay. The second question is a little more difficult to answer, and I always give the answer that people don't like, which is it depends. And it really depends on the technology that you have, that you're using in your yard, how much does the sprinklers put out? Do they put 2 inches of water out an hour, or do they put less than that? And you have to be able to know that in order to properly schedule your irrigations. There are a lot of new technologies out that actually help you do that. One of them are smart timers, which actually take information from the local weather conditions and adjust your length time of your sprinklers based on that. They can actually be programmed into the clock, or it can be gathered from a satellite signal that is sent to your controller every night. Interesting. Another way of doing it is what we call our soil moisture sensors. And soil moisture sensors, this is an example of one. This soil moisture sensor is actually buried in the ground, and it actually tells the controller if the soil is too wet or too dry. And the homeowner, all they have to know is, do my plants look like they're too dry or do they look like they're too wet? And you can make that adjustment relatively easy. This is an example of what your typical sprinkler system looks like. It usually hasn't been designed correctly or even maintained correctly. So what happens is if you have too much pressure in your system and you haven't lowered it, you get what we call misting. And most of that water does not land on your plant material. It'll actually evaporate into the air. Adjusting a sprinkler is very easy. You can just take a screwdriver or this little handy-dandy tool, and you can turn the screw on top, and you can either turn it off completely or just adjust it so you're not getting overspray.
Like you said, most of that water doesn't end up in the on the lawn, and as we look down here, you can see the water is running off right here. You can see the stream into the gutter. So this is water you're paying for, literally going down the drain.
Exactly.
Now, to me, these look very similar to a lot of sprinklers I've seen. What's different about these?
These are actually regular pop-up sprinklers that are very common to most landscapes, but they've been retrofitted with a nozzle that's called a microspray. Okay. And so you just put the new top on, and that microspray does what the other sprinklers did in the other landscape. It puts out water much more slowly and allows it to infiltrate in.
Darren, an important element of water conservation we haven't mentioned is obviously plant selection. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Plant selection is really important when you meld it with your irrigation design. And probably one of the most important things I can mention is that you definitely have to look at irrigation hydrozoning. So that means that you want to put those plants that use the same amount of water or a similar amount of water on the same irrigation valve and not mix plants together. So this landscape shows an example of a grass that uses a little bit more water than your typical water efficient plant, and it's on its own irrigation valve. Right next to it are some plant material that actually use much less water, and so they're on a separate valve and allowing it not to irrigate hardly at all.
Now, if people want to learn more about water conservation, where can we send them?
The best place you can go is I have a website that you can visit, and at that website you will find various information about water conservation as well as water quality, and a calendar of events of when we have open house and tour and docents of this location.
Tina Spindler, an Orange County Master Gardener, is taking the time to show us how to successfully plant in a pot. So now we're all inspired to plant. Can you tell us what we need to know to get started?
Sure. What we have here are a couple of pots. So this will be talking about planting in containers as opposed to in the ground.
Right.
When you're planting in containers, you want to choose a fairly decent sized container, because you have to remember that the poor plants are going to be completely dependent on this container for their nutrients and their water. So you want a container that's going to hold a fair amount of soil and water.
All right, good.
So you're going to take the big one, all right? And then what you want to do is you want to choose a bagged potting soil mix. You do not want to use a shovelful of soil from your ground, because that is usually too heavy and also could contain some pathogens that you wouldn't want to introduce to the new plants that you're planting.
Tell me what we're planting here today.
We're planting some bacopa and some ageratum.
Okay, and so if we were planting something different, so we're getting a particular soil for this plant?
This is a general purpose potting soil, so this potting soil would be good for any ornamental flowers or vegetables. If you were planting something like succulents, they want a different type of mix that is more fast draining, so you would want something that's called palm and succulent mix, palm and cactus mix, and they come in bags as well. And then if you were planting something like azaleas or a blueberry that requires acid soil, you would want an azalea camellia planting mix.
Okay, so there's basically 3 different kinds of planting mix.
Pretty much, yeah.
So how do we get started?
So what we do is we just go ahead and pour this in. I'll let you direct it.
All right.
And we're going to fill it
how far?
To within about 1 inch of the top.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think I'm there.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take your trowel and dig a little hole. You can see about how big it needs to be.
Oh, the size of the pot?
The size of the pot. Just scoop that soil into this extra pot.
Okay. We've got 2 holes.
You've got 2 holes dug. We're going to squeeze the pot.
Squeeze
it.
Okay.
Then using your hand, you want to put your hand across the top of the pot.
Okay.
And turn it upside down so that you catch the plant.
Oh.
Keep squeezing and pull that pot off as you squeeze.
All right.
There you go.
All right.
Now you can see that these roots are pretty matted from being inside the pot. So what we want to do is we want to tickle or tease those roots out. Because if you don't tease the roots out, they're going to continue to grow in that nice little cylinder shape, and they're not going to really reach out into the soil very well. So that you've done that, turn it right side up and put it down in there.
All right.
And you want the top of the root ball to be even with your soil. So you're going to need to push it in a little bit or dig your hole a little deeper.
All right. I think I'm good.
That's good.
Okay.
Then this is a draping plant, so go ahead and let it hang over the edge there.
All
so we're going to let it hang over. We also need to add a little fertilizer as we're planting. So what we want to do is, even though this says tomato and vegetable fertilizer, it's okay.
All right.
Because plants can't read. And this is actually just a balanced fertilizer. Balanced means these numbers down here on the box of fertilizer are approximately equal. So this size pot can use a couple tablespoons. That's about a couple tablespoons there.
All right.
Okay. And then we're just going to mix it into the soil.
Okay.
Well, as you water it, you can imagine it's going to percolate down through the rest of the pot. So I think you're probably good.
All right.
And now we're ready to go ahead and plant the rest of our plants in there.
Awesome.
Yeah, the object is to get those roots to hang down so that they grow down into the soil.
You're a much better tickler than I am.
I think we'll add just a little bit of this soil back so that, because what we want to do is make sure that have about 1 inch of space between the lip and the start of the soil.
What? Now, why is that?
Because you want to be able to have your water not fall over the edge when you're watering.
You lose nutrients.
You lose nutrients. And you also want to make sure, though, that you have the pot fairly full, because what will happen if it's not is your plants will sink and then you won't be able to see them as well. So.
Oh, okay. So aesthetics.
So there you go.
Very nice. And here is my first potted plant, which I expect to live. Okay, Tina, now I know how to plant in a pot. What if I want to put something in the ground?
The key to having success when you plant things in the ground is to improve your soil.
Okay.
Our soil in Irvine, by and large, is clay, and it's great for making adobe bricks, but not so much for growing plants. So what you want to do is you want to dig down to a depth of 6 to 10 inches and turn that soil over. And then you're going to take a bag of soil amendment and sprinkle about 3-inch layer on top of your soil. Okay. And then take your really scary looking tool right there, which is a cultivator.
Nice.
And you're going to want to mix that soil amendment into that native soil that you've dug up. And while you're doing that, you're going to want to add a little bit of fertilizer, just as we did when we were planting in the pot. You can use all sorts of bagged soil amendment. If you have homemade compost, that's a wonderful soil amendment.
Right.
But what we have today is something that's called garden soil. It is sometimes called mulch. You just want to make sure that it is a product that is fairly fine. You don't want to try and incorporate something like bark chips. And the object is basically to loosen the soil and incorporate air and organic material into the soil, as well as fertilizer before you plant.
Now, if you still want more ideas, or if you have questions about gardening, the City of Irvine provides one of the greatest resources ever for gardeners. It's the Farm and Food Lab here at the Orange County Great Park. Come on down, you'll find 12 beds raised with different gardens, such as the Sensory Garden, a garden designed to be experienced through all your senses. The Ethnic Garden, a garden featuring vegetables and herbs that thrive in our climate, coming all the way from Mexico, Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. The Butterfly Garden, which shows a selection of plants that attract butterflies. The Edible Garden shows how you can have your decorative plants right alongside your edible plants and create an aesthetically pleasing effect. And even an easy access garden, designed for disabled individuals who like the garden, or even people who might just like the garden standing up. But maybe the greatest resource here at the Farm and Food Lab are the volunteers that come here. Meet Hank Fishman. Hank, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello, good morning.
Hank, what can people expect to learn when they come here to the Farm and Food Lab?
People who come to visit to the Farm and Food Lab can expect to learn anything about gardening, especially fertilizers, food, pest control, composting, anything they need to have some knowledge about their home garden.
Excellent. And when they come here, what specific exhibits do you have that people can learn from?
Well, we have composting exhibits, we have vermiculture exhibits, and we have the gardens, which display all the different things that people can grow. Visitors can see examples of the hay bale garden, containerized gardening, composting, and vermiculture.
What is vermiculture?
Vermiculture is the use of worm castings to use as a plant nutrient.
And lastly, if people want to have their questions answered, what resources does the Farm and Food Lab provide for them?
Farm and Food Lab has 2 sets of lecture series, one in the spring and one in the fall. We also have master gardeners here on Saturday and Sunday between the hours of 10 and 2. And we also provide a Master Gardener of Orange County hotline for people who need to get questions answered by internet or by phone.
So they come down on the weekends, they can talk to a Master Gardener one-on-one, get any of their questions answered, or they get a phone number that they can check in at any time?
That is correct, or they can go by internet.
Everything you need to know about gardens right here at the Farm and Food Lab. I hope you've enjoyed our gardening episode of Irvine Scene, and I hope you've learned a little bit about how to plan your garden, how to plant your garden, so you can have fun playing in your garden. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next Irvine Scene.